The following program is powered by Ride the Wave Media.
You are now listening to The Restored Wife.
Welcome to the podcast where we discover the relationship preventative medicine you didn't know you needed and help you create the relationship and life you dreamed of when you first said yes to your husband. I'm Brenda Kradolfer, a certified Laura Doyle relationship coach, and today's topic is how to break free from the numbness and loneliness of pretending that everything is fine. I can still remember being a young mom at home with my two young kids. I had everything that I wanted on paper. I had my own home. I had two children. I had a husband who went to work every day. And we lived in the neighborhood that I had pined over for months and months. And I found myself still just feeling unfulfilled. I loved being at home with my kids, and I recognized the huge blessing that it was. And yet, I still struggled in my relationship with my husband. He went to work and he had lunch every day with his friends. They were playing ping pong and having a great time. And he was always trying to connect with me. He'd call me at lunch on his way home from work. And I was happy to hear from him. But I was also exhausted and lonely at home. So when he came through the door and I just wanted to be rescued from the isolation, I was really sensitive. He could say or do something that would just really make me question our relationship as a whole. And this had its inception way before we ever were married a few years and had some kids. It really started before we were married. I had created this image of the person that I thought my husband was. And we had a long distance relationship where we talked on the phone a lot. And I had a lot of time to work through some of the things that troubled me. But I kept feeling this just desire to see what would happen. I had created this fantasy, or I had moments of fantasy that would just light me up, that we would meet and we would be married and it would all happen so quickly. And it did. Actually, that happened. We met up, we talked about marriage, and we were both on board. And then we were separate again. And we were separate for most of the time before we got married. And so I had a lot of time to myself to think about this decision. And I waffled back and forth a lot. Sometimes I was totally ready to go through with it. And other times I just felt like maybe it was the wrong choice. And maybe I was doing it for the wrong reasons. But every time I talked to him and I shared my feelings with him, he was really just reassuring and patient with me. And it just made me want to go through with our marriage. So we did. But I had this belief that once we were married, things were all just going to work the way that I always imagined that they would. Very traditional husband and wife roles. And yet I imagined so much respect and love and care. And I got a lot of that. But I also had these moments where I didn't understand him at all. I didn't understand how we could be married just a few weeks and he would want to go golfing with a friend. And I didn't really have anything else I wanted to do. I wanted to spend all my time with him. I really thought like being with people sometimes can be hard. Making friends is hard. And now I have a husband, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And so when things like that would happen, he might be on his computer working on something for a really long time while I looked over at him and longed for connection. And I wasn't getting it the way that I wanted to receive it. And all of these little things just added up. All these little expectations that I had, they kept crashing in on me when they didn't happen. And I started to really spin in regret about the choice that I had made. But I didn't talk about it with him or with anyone. I just let it fester. And then one day early on in our relationship, he said something or did something. I don't even know what it was. But I was so disappointed. I was so hurt. I felt so alone. And I know that he didn't mean to hurt me. But in the moment, it felt like I had made a huge mistake. This was not the right choice for me. And I felt guilty. I felt shame. I felt just awful, really. And so I didn't know what else to do because I really was starting to feel contempt for him. And he didn't know what was going on. And so I just came out and I said, I don't think I made the right choice. I think I might have made a mistake going through with our marriage. So we talked about that and we just took it at face value. It sounds really dramatic, but it was actually a really calm conversation where we both expressed that we didn't want to get divorced. We'd seriously only been married like a month or two, maybe. I didn't want to hurt him. That was the last thing that I wanted to do. And sometimes that would come back to haunt me. Like maybe I just married him because I didn't want to say no. I didn't want to hurt him. And that was painful to think about. That did not feel good. And so I told him that, and I knew that it hurt. But it was a way for me to get out some of my hurt that I was experiencing. And I'm not even sure if we discussed what was getting in the way, what was causing the issue. It was just, that was the culmination. Like I had made a mistake and that was the only thing that I could think about in that moment. Like I said, we talked, really just came to the moment of truth. Like he didn't want to split up. I didn't want to split up. I really didn't. I wanted things to work. They just weren't working. And so we resolved to just keep trying. And we joked about this is just an arranged marriage. Like we didn't really know each other that well before we got married. We arranged it ourselves. We decided like, hey, this seems like a good option. We want to move forward. And we did it without really spending a whole lot of time with each other in everyday life. And so this kind of became an inside joke that we were an arranged marriage and we were going to make it work. We may have talked about communication. We always knew communication was really important. We'd heard the marriage advice. And so we just went on from there and things were good for a little while. But then inevitably, those things that I wanted to have just didn't seem within my reach. I didn't feel like my husband really knew who I was and where I came from and what I had struggled with. And honestly, looking back, I didn't tell him a whole lot. I was really private about a lot of things. I wasn't able to be vulnerable. I wanted a fresh start when I got married. I didn't want to dredge up old things. I just wanted this life that I had dreamed of for a long time, of this family. And we pushed through, and there were little ups and downs. There were really good times. And then there were moments where I wanted to walk out the door and just be done. It wasn't working. I felt terrible. I felt like this was just going to haunt me for the rest of my life. And like I said, then we kept going on. But when I had 2 kids and I was at home and my husband was coming home and talking about his work and the fun things that he was doing, I really started to feel resentment too. Really felt like he was responsible for helping me to be happy, and he was happy and he was doing his thing. And I really relied on him to provide that for me. And so when he wasn't able to give me everything that I thought he should, I really wasn't able to see him for who he was, for who he is. And there were times when I would compare him to other husbands that we knew, or even reading news articles about crime in the world. And it was, these crimes were done by men. Somehow he's associated with that. And I could just look at him. I could just glare at him, and I could feel those icky feelings of just, I didn't want to be around anything associated with anything like that. So I got to a state of kind of numbness and low-key depression. I'd wake up in the morning and not really be looking forward to anything in particular, just going through the motions, getting my babies dressed, changed, fed, doing things with them, maybe doing a house project here and there. But the moments of like true happiness for me were pretty fleeting. And I often got stuck in this cycle of thinking I'd made a mistake. And people would come along and say something to me that would like take me out of it. Or I would pray and pray and pray some more. And I would have my heart softened and be able to reconnect with my husband and enjoy our life together. And I was learning things about myself all along the way. Over the years, I was doing more self-discovery and learning about my personality. And I eventually got into working on my thoughts and expectations. And that was really helpful to see that I had created this huge book full of expectations for my husband, and that it was hurting our relationship. But I really, really wanted to hold on to those expectations. In my mind, those expectations were the right expectations to have, and he was just falling short. And then I, of course, was doing everything I could possibly do to uphold these expectations without realizing that I was really giving up something so crucial from those expectations, really a loving, close, connected relationship at the expense of all of these expectations that I had and these beliefs that maybe I had made a mistake. It was so easy to go back to that every time. And I didn't like it. I hated the feeling, but it just seemed like that was the truth. It was really the truth. And so I had to work through it all the time until I got to the other side of it, where I was like, okay, no, that's not true, or reflect on some other experience that I had. Something would be brought to my remembrance about why I did this in the first place, what really drew me in. But they were fleeting, right? They didn't stick around. But then one day I was in my little online community where I got my social interaction while being isolated at home. And this was just like a fun fashion group that I was a part of my self-discovery journey. And somebody came in there, and this was not the normal topic of conversation, but somebody came in and said, I don't know where else to go. My marriage is in shambles. This and this and this is going on, and I am just at a loss. And that's why I'm here in this random Facebook group. It was a private group. And I marveled, like this was something I would never in a million years do or share. But I was drawn in. I'm reading all the comments. Everybody had something to say. There were paragraphs of things telling her to leave, or just all kinds of stuff, really all over the map. Kept reading. And I get down to this comment, and it says, I was once in a spot like you. And then I read this book, and it was the only thing that helped. It was like the shortest comment in the entire thread. And then right after that one, another one. It was like same. I was in a similar situation, and this book was the only thing that helped me. And the book had a really interesting title, so I was intrigued. What is this all about? After reading those comments, I felt like things are pretty good in my relationship right now, but this sounds like maybe it could be good preventative medicine. to avoid some potential pitfalls in the future. So I got that book from the library and I started to read it. And my perspective started to shift in a way I never would have imagined possible. The things that I had been resisting for so long and that really came second nature, the thoughts that I'd made a mistake, that my husband was not right for me or we weren't right for each other. And this book really challenged that. It said I had a good man, that I would not have married him if he wasn't a good guy, that I was a smart, capable woman. And there were reasons that mean something. And so I had that in my mind, and things were shifting in my brain in kind of dramatic ways when I think about it. And my husband came home just like normal. And just like normal, he comes to greet me and he says something or does something that just makes me feel like this man does not know what I'm going through, what being at home all day with young kids is like, being alone, not having really any outlets or any way to create them. I just didn't know how to make the connections. I really didn't know how to take care of myself. I just thought my life was meant to take care of my husband and kids and that would bring me happiness. And it did. A lot of it did. But there was definitely some things missing. So I go down my old familiar path. I roll my eyes or I just feel cold towards him. I don't really want to talk to him after whatever happened. It was so small, I'm sure, such a minor thing. And then I realized what I'm doing. I had awareness that I had never had before, ever. And I laughed to myself because I'm realizing that I'm going down this path where I think that this is a mistake or he's the wrong guy or he doesn't know me or whatever negative thought it was that would come that I didn't even have conscious knowledge of. They happen so fast. And I caught myself doing it. And I look up and I see my husband. And I see that he's playing with our kids. And on this particular day, he's really into it. He didn't always come home and play with the little ones like this, but I think he had one of them on his shoulders and they're laughing and my heart just melted. Like I saw the good man in front of me. It was so clear. And all that tension that was brewing, the coldness and the hurt that I was feeling in that moment just melted away. And I smiled and I approached him to give him a hug. And he was like, what just happened? Like he knew how this goes and already moved on. He knew that was a lost cause and I was going to come around eventually. But I just went in and I hugged him and I smiled at him. And he's like, what is going on? And I just stayed quiet. And he's like, is it like, whatever it is, it's like, I like it. And he asked if it was this podcast that I had been listening to, which had also helped me quite a bit. But it was really that book that I was reading. It was that book that I was reading that was changing how I viewed him and how I viewed myself in our relationship. And so we shared a hug in that moment instead of the usual breakdown at the end of the day when he'd come home. And that's when I knew that there was something to this. And I kept reading and trying to do the things that the book said. I felt like I had a new understanding of things and went along like that until a big decision came up and stuff hit the fan. And I found myself back in that downward spiral again, questioning everything, feeling just so stuck. Like I said, I didn't know how to communicate in a way that left me feeling good afterwards. Most of the things that I would think to say in those moments were insulting and critical, and I knew I didn't want to do that. I knew from the very beginning of our relationship when I told him I think I had made a mistake and I saw the hurt in his eyes that I would try never to do that again. I didn't want to do that again. And so I just stuffed it all down, and it just festered and spun and dragged me down with it. But yeah, I just kept going. I was like, I know it's in that book. I gotta go back to that book. I gotta learn these things in here. And what am I missing? A few things happened like that. And then eventually I was at a point in my life where I was just ready to really invest in myself again, really make myself a priority again in some ways. And I started a deep dive on these skills that were in this book, and I got extra help and support around them. I found a community of women who all had come back from really difficult circumstances in their relationships. And I got to be friends with them, and I got to hear their stories, and I got to feel their pain, and I got to feel my own pain, and I got to have it acknowledged and recognized as valid. And then I got tools. I got the most practical tools and support that helped me to really take my relationship from pretty good with a few snags to good all the time, to feeling understood and supported and really heard by my husband in a way that I had just given up on. I really get to receive his love now in a way that I didn't before. My husband's always been willing to work on things. I know he's always wanted to make me happy. I just thought, if you wanted to make me happy, then you would do XYZ, and you're not doing them. And so I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe it until someone came along and told me, your husband really wants you to be happy. But I didn't realize that I had a part to play in it. I really thought he would be the provider of that happiness. And so going back to that first moment when he came through the door and I saw myself doing our old dance and my perspective changed in an instant, that's where it all started. And I'm so grateful that it did, and that I get to have the kind of relationship that I always dreamed of having. Now, my husband is my biggest cheerleader. He's a wonderful father, and our home is more peaceful, more connected. I feel so much less stress in my life, and we have the kind of partnership that I would hear people talk about on Instagram, that I would see videos of these happy couples and the things that their husband would do, the way that he would support her in raising the kids, things that I thought were all just nice for them. And I had some of it, but I didn't have all of it. But now I have all of it. I have more help around the house than I've ever had our entire relationship. I used to really just feel like the only responsible one in our house, and I can do a whole other podcast on that alone, but I don't feel that way anymore. I feel so light. I feel like maybe I should pitch in a little bit more now, because my husband just does so much to make me happy and to make our home exactly how I want it. And now I'm able to express those things in a way that inspires him to make them happen in our home. And it's incredible. And I want to share with you how I did it and how other women do it and what what we found that really took some of the most challenging circumstances in a relationship to a place of love and bliss and fidelity and commitment and feeling adored and cherished and loved for exactly who we are as women in our world. So stay tuned. There's going to be more to come. Thank you for listening. If you have made it to the end of this first episode, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for hearing my story. And I hope that it resonates with someone out there. I want to give a special thank you to Blaine at Ride the Wave Media, who is producing this podcast, and to all of those who have supported and encouraged me in sharing my story and sharing this work with the world. It's powerful. It's practical. It's not the hard work that we think of when we think relationships are just hard. They don't have to be that hard. They can actually be much easier, much more fulfilling with less work, surprisingly. So stay tuned and we'll talk some more about it, and take really good care of you.